It's empty.
The end of times. I just want to go home.
What we should be asking ourselves is, what do we do now?
Where did everybody go?
Janai and Riley, a young American couple, arrive in Iceland, eager to soak in its natural wonders and spend some quality time together. They check into a cozy hotel and set off to explore, starting with a visit to a mesmerizing geothermal pool. Janai appreciates Riley's gesture, knowing he spent all his savings to make this trip happen. Riley brushes it off, saying he just wants to make her happy. Janai notices Riley brought his father's old Rolleiflex camera instead of a modern digital one. She's surprised, but Riley explains that he prefers capturing the raw, unfiltered moments, imperfections and all, rather than relying on technology to perfect the shots. He's still learning, but promises to one day take the perfect portrait of her. Their adventure continues as they visit an ancient church where a priest shares tales of the past. He romanticizes the simplicity of life before Christianity, describing it as a time of long journeys and discoveries. The couple roams around the island, laughing and capturing everything with Riley's camera. Janai reveals that her father is a preacher, and while his church isn't as grand, she often visited it and believes in God. They then explore breathtaking waterfalls, and Janai is awestruck by the beauty surrounding them. They're both elated, thinking the trip is everything they hoped for. But that night, things take a strange turn. Janai struggles to sleep. It's too bright outside, despite the late hour. She looks out the window and sees odd flashes of light, mistaking them for an unusually vivid aurora borealis. Exhaustion eventually pulls her into sleep. The next morning, Riley wakes Janai up at 10 a.m. But something's off. The date on his digital watch reads 2028, though Janai doesn't notice it. She's groggy, still stuck in her own time, and the unrelenting daylight makes it even harder to wake up. Despite the odd feeling in the air, she manages to get out of bed. They head downstairs for breakfast, only to find the hotel eerily silent. No staff, no guests, just empty tables. Puzzled, they decide to try a cafe, but stepping outside, they find the streets deserted. The traffic lights blink normally and signs above shops are lit, but not a soul is in sight. Confused, Riley wonders if there's a citywide event or holiday they missed, maybe something to do with the solstice. But the emptiness only deepens the mystery as they venture further into the ghostly quiet town. The couple strolls down an eerily deserted street, their voices echoing in the emptiness as they shout for help. But there's no one, no shop staff, no pedestrians, no one to answer their calls. Their phones are silent, as if the world beyond them has vanished. Riley and Janai are on edge, their anxiety growing as they push open the door to an empty cafe. The televisions are on, but they only broadcast reruns and entertainment. No news, no updates, nothing to explain what's happening. Panic starts to grip Janai while Riley is equally baffled. If there's been a disaster, where are the signs? If aliens invaded, where's the evidence? Even the internet, though functional, is devoid of any new activity. It's as if the entire world has simply paused. They return to their hotel room, and Janai frantically tries to reach family and friends, but all her calls go unanswered. Riley pulls up a world map on his laptop, but every place is the same: empty, lifeless. Desperate for answers, they head outside again, searching for any sign of life. They spot a working car, but no owner in sight. With no other options, they take the car and drive through the city, hoping to find someone, anyone. But the streets remain silent, the buildings empty. They even reach a church, but it too is abandoned. Their drive takes them beyond the city limits, but it's all the same. No one answers their calls. Only answering machines greet them on the other end. As they drive, theories swirl between them. Riley, ever the rational thinker, speculates on viruses, mass evacuations, and even the second coming. But Janai, exhausted and overwhelmed, just wants to sleep. Back at their room, the fear of the unknown haunts them both. Janai is tormented by thoughts of divine selection. Perhaps they've been chosen for some higher purpose. Riley, however, clings to the idea of a virus, insisting that the island's inhabitants might have simply fled. He tries to remain optimistic, distracting Janai with mundane tasks. He makes her coffee and drives her to a store where they load up on supplies, filling the trunks of 2 SUVs with enough food to last. They choose a house to settle in, a place to call their own in this strange new world. Riley, determined to keep Janai's spirits up, takes her shopping for new clothes. He reassures her that the island's geothermal energy will keep the power running for a long time, and that they'll be fine. They drink at a bar, trying to pretend everything is normal, even playing strip games to lighten the mood. But the next morning brings hangovers and the heavy weight of reality crashing back down. Janai's thoughts spiral into darker territory. She talks about being tested by God, struggling with the difference between faith and religion. She wonders what plan might be in store for them, but for now, they're the only inhabitants of this forsaken world. In an attempt to reclaim some joy, Riley takes her on a tour of the island, snapping photos of Janai against beautiful backdrops. They find a geothermal pool one day and indulge in a warm, relaxing bath, letting the tension melt away. They make love on the grass, sleep under the stars, and for a brief moment, everything seems okay. But reality is never far behind. On a grocery run, Janai watches in horror as Riley, goofing around on a shopping cart, crashes and injures his arm. That evening, over a romantic dinner, she can't hold back her fear any longer. She makes Riley promise never to take such risks again, because if something happened to him, she'd be truly alone in this desolate place. The isolation is driving her into a deep depression, despite Riley's assurances that he'll take care of himself. Janai's mind drifts back to her home, to a book her father gave her, one she turned into a diary filled with the most precious moments of her life. She longs to hold it again, to find comfort in its pages. Riley, sensing her despair, reminds her that they have each other, and together they can survive. In this world, all of humanity's achievements are theirs to use, but the emptiness around them is inescapable. As the days stretch on, the weight of their situation presses down harder, leaving them to grapple with the unsettling reality that they might be the last two people on Earth. Time is ticking, and the food is spoiling fast. Janai's frustration grows as Riley mindlessly consumes whatever he finds without any thought for the future. With the electricity about to fail, their remaining meat will soon rot. Riley's solution? Start farming and hunting. Janai scoffs. He might shoot a cow. But then what? Janai begins wandering alone more frequently, and one day, she finds herself at a church. Desperately, she questions the statues outside. Why them? Did everyone else get to go home while they are stuck in this nightmare? Why is this happening to her? Noticing Janai's darkening mood, Riley tries to lift her spirits. He takes her on more explorations, sharing stories about the island's history, convinced that it holds some kind of mystical significance. But Janai feels nothing special about the place. One day, Riley shows her the remains of an old plane he discovered. To him, it's beautiful, a piece of history. To Janai, it's just a decaying relic, a symbol of the dead world they now inhabit. Furious, she storms off, but eventually returns to find Riley peacefully asleep in the wreckage. Riley's obsession with photographing the deserted city grows. He captures anything that catches his eye, though he knows the film will never be developed. One day, while wandering through a shop, he remembers that once the power goes out, the water will stop flowing. He gathers supplies to rig a makeshift system, but later, stepping into an elevator, he's gripped by panic when the doors close. If the power cuts out, no one would find him. Meanwhile, Janai finds solace in a movie theater, overwhelmed by memories of what was. As Riley sets up a water collection system powered by a windmill, Janai stumbles upon an abandoned farm and finds a horse to ride. She listens to old voicemails from loved ones, a painful reminder of the world they lost. She shows Riley a serene spot in the countryside, puzzled by his insistence on taking photos. He promises her he'll find a way to develop them. Janai, reflecting on their situation, likens it to sitting on a glacier, a force that kills everything in its path. Maybe, she muses, God's patience has run out too. Back in the city, while Riley is preoccupied, Janai finds a photographer's studio. They later visit a flower shop where the sight of dead plants deeply upsets Janai. Sensing her growing despair, Riley suggests they go camping, convincing her it's time to find a place where they can live in comfort. Their search leads them to a house by a lake, seemingly perfect. Even Janai admits the place is beautiful. But as they explore, they discover an old man, Niels, weak and starving. They share their supplies, and Niels, shocked by their belief that they're the last survivors, tells them he returned to his home after the disaster, hoping to find his family. Janai's brief happiness at finding another human quickly fades as Niels's bleak outlook takes hold. He recounts his life, how he spent years away from his family to provide for them, only to return to a son who had grown up without him and a wife who no longer loved him. He accepts their current fate as God's will, advising Janai not to give up because she's human and must fight. But he warns that if there was a divine plan, humanity has failed it. Riley breaks the news to Janai. Niels is dead. The shock hits her hard. Riley mentions he found a cemetery by the lake and picked a spot next to Niels' family. But Janai questions whether anyone really cared about him in life and if they'd be happy to see him now. Riley is thrown off by her cold reaction, but Janai suggests they skip the burial altogether. No one needs it. Riley tries to remind her of the importance of human customs, but Janai's mind is already somewhere else, contemplating if there might be others who still need their help. Back in the city, Janai becomes obsessed with finding survivors. She drives through the deserted streets, marking empty houses with red tape. Riley watches her, concerned, telling her she's searching for answers that don't exist. They should focus on their new reality. But Janai isn't convinced that this can even be called life. While she scours the city, Riley finishes his wind turbine in the yard, a symbol of his attempt to rebuild. Time drags on. The couple roams the island, with Riley snapping photos of Janai in their bleak world. One day, he takes her to a waterfall, trying to impart some wisdom. Water is always alive. It flows, freezes, melts, and flows again. Life persists. There's no past or future here, only the present. They need to grasp that and survive. But Janai, lost in her thoughts, interrupts him with a kiss. Back at the house, Janai notices the water is running low. She washes the dishes in a basin while Riley drifts off to sleep. Suddenly, she sees an email on the laptop. With trembling hands, she opens it and breaks down when she realizes it's a photo from Riley. Morning comes, and Riley finds a large envelope addressed to him on the kitchen table. He connects his water system and opens the envelope. Inside are photos of Janai, but she's nowhere to be found. Panic sets in. Riley races out, searching all their favorite spots. Meanwhile, his water system kicks into gear, and water begins flowing into the house. No electricity needed, but that's the least of Riley's concerns. He drives around the island frantically until he finds Janai's lifeless body floating in a geothermal pool. The realization hits. She chose this. In a moment of despair, Riley considers joining her and jumps into the water. But something pulls him back. He surfaces, drags himself out, and sits beside her, weeping. He lays her on the grass, lost and uncertain of his next move. Eventually, he leaves her there, unable to do more. Riley gets into the car and drives aimlessly, his hands off the wheel, teetering on the edge of giving up. But slowly, his hands return to the steering wheel, gripping it firmly. A decision has been made. He chooses to keep living. The film is called Bokeh, the blurred parts of a photograph that highlight what's truly significant. The film mirrors this, contrasting the final survivors on Earth. A man who adapts and presses on, and a woman who spirals into despair, searching for meaning. The question lingers. Can humanity rise again with such fractured hope? If you like this video and want to watch our recap of the movie, The Seeding, then click on the screen now and prepare to be blown away.